Okay, Iris.
Right, hello. Is anybody there?
Yes, we've just muted everyone because we've started the recording. So if you want to ask a question, just raise your hand using the reactions button in the bottom of the screen, and Iris is going to unmute you to ask your question. Okay, let me unmute you, Iris. Sorry. Ask to unmute. There we go. We should be all sorted.
When I go to speaker, all I've got is myself.
Yes, I pinned you for everyone so they'd recognize you coming into the meeting. So when you've finished your introduction, I'll change it.
Okay, thanks. Right, I think everybody's here. Thank you everybody for attending. And Susan is going to take us through, it's a lagoon, isn't it?
Yes.
A lagoon in acrylics. And she's going to introduce herself and we can get underway. Okay. And if you have any questions, if you just sort of do whatever you said, and I will unmute you.
Okay, lovely. I'm going to release through. Oh, here's somebody else coming in. Gina Dunstan.
Gina Dunstan.
Okay, I'll keep you unmuted, Iris, so we can chat if necessary. And let's go over to my picture.
That's it.
Hello,
lovely.
everyone. My name's Susan, and I'm over here in Jamaica in my studio. Welcome, and thank you for joining me today. Thank you for inviting me. It's lovely to be with you in St Albans too. I have been painting now as a full-time artist for about 25 years. And my first career was in scuba diving, which is what brought me to Jamaica. So you can probably imagine that most of my inspiration comes from the environment, and the motivation is to sort of help to raise awareness for protecting the environment as much as possible. So just for a quick second before we go to the other camera, which will be focusing on what I'm doing, I just thought I'd give you a quick little glimpse of what my view outside the window is like, because it's probably a little different to yours today, and it might be just a ray of sunshine to cheer you up. So here's my balcony from my studio. So you can see there's a lot of trees and really no other houses and stuff in view, although I've got some lovely neighbours nearby, but you can't really see anybody else much. So as I mentioned before, we'll keep everybody muted except for me and Iris. And if you want to ask a question, you can either type something in the chat box if you know how to do that, or just raise your hand with the reactions button. There's a little one that says raise hand, and then she'll notice you and let you ask a question. I'm not fussy about being interrupted with questions. I'd rather you ask them when it's relevant to what I'm doing. And let me just share with you, I think we did share this already with the group, but this is the reference picture that I'll be working from. And as you can see, it is a sort of lagoon in the Black River. That's on the south coast of Jamaica. And you can take a tour up the Black River. I've done it a few times in a canoe. And the guys who take you are obviously well familiar with the river. Near the mouth of the river, there are crocodiles. So it is quite a protected, endangered area, because the crocodiles are protected in Jamaica too. And when you got far enough up the river, and you see lots of different wildlife and birds and mangroves, they tell you all about the mangroves, which I'll elaborate on later. And you get up to this little area here, which is up past where the crocodiles go, so they tell you. And at this point you can get off, go to Rudy's bar, have a red stripe, and then climb up in the mangrove tree there and drop into the river with the rope swing. So it is quite idyllic. And in this picture, we've got a mixture of things. We've got a canoe boat of the kind that we're talking. They use them to go out to sea for fishing all night. So they're quite robust in terms of, it's not the kind of canoe you would go out, with one friend and paddles. It's much more robust than that. It'd probably hold 12 people. You've got this little charming handmade wooden walkway, a bit like a jetty, leading up to that tree with a step ladder up it. And the tree is actually a kind of mangrove. But I'll get started on the painting and talk more about it as we go along. The last thing I just want to share with you before we go further is I always start with a thumbnail sketch just to plan out which portions of the painting I want to focus on. And it familiarizes me with the proportions so that when I come to do my painting, I don't draw anything first. I just go straight in and paint it in acrylics. So this is just pen so that you can see it clearer, but I would normally do a pencil sketch. And so I'm looking for the large shapes, the proportions, where the horizon lies, where the darkest darks and the lightest lights are. You'll probably notice from the reference picture, when you compare the two, I have chopped a bit off the bottom. I thought a lot of that sort of sandy, muddy foreground was a bit unnecessary, and that allows us to get a bit better view of the boat and the walkway. So that's the view that I'm going to be working on creating for you. And let's just make this a bit bigger here. Okay, and I'm going to go over to, in a moment, I'll go over to, I've got my board here is a piece of plyboard, which I've treated with several coats of white. And then I just toned it with a finish wash of acrylic that is yellow-green and raw sienna mixture. I've not been too fussy about, it's a slightly warmer towards the bottom, which always tends to bring the foreground towards us, especially as I've got that sort of muddy look in the bottom of the picture. I thought that would not hurt for it to be already toned that way. But generally it can be any color that's going to go and sort of unify the picture. Okay, let me move over to the other camera and explain my little setup. Okay, that wasn't what I wanted to do. Let's see if that will come off. There we go. Okay, so I think you should all be able to see that fairly well, and I'm going to be working like this to explain what I'm getting on with. So first of all, I've got a little workstation here with recycled pots for my water. I use quite a lot of paper towel. You have repurposed spray bottles just full of water so that I can keep my paints moist, and if necessary spray onto that. That won't really apply to this painting, but if I'm doing watercolor, I use them for spraying and getting effects. For my brushes, I use Liquitex. In fact, most of the paints are Liquitex too, but Liquitex Freestyle. I don't know if you've seen these paddle style brushes, and also the long handled. They're all flat brushes, 2 and 3 inches. Those are what I'm going to start with. As I work my way down through to finer detail, I've got some lovely rosemary brushes here, which are probably my favorites, in a 3/4 inch and a 1/2 inch. There's a Dale Rowney 1 inch there, I think, as well. Oh, that's maybe 3/4. I also like to have things handy, repurposed items again, credit cards and little applicators. Can do some scratching and surface texture. And my paints, I like to use these Liquitex heavy body acrylics. I did mention that I put a thin layer on. This can be, I quite often use thinner acrylics to make the background so that it goes on nice and easily. And my palette, which I'm covering with this very important shower cap, which does the job of stopping and drying up too much. I like to use these round palettes. Because they're heavy body paints, they're not going to dribble out too much if I hold it up to show you like that when I'm mixing. That dribble is because I've sprayed them recently. So most of the colours in the picture, as you can see, are blues and yellows and greens. So I've got quite a variety here. I've got French ultramarine, cobalt blue, a phthalo blue, which I'm going to try not to get too much into because it can overtake your painting. This is a Liquitex colour called light blue. That's just a titanium white. Over here, I've got the green gold, which is actually by Winsor & Newton. That's, I think, an odd one out of this collection. This is light green permanent by Liquitex, a cadmium yellow. We've got yellow ochre and raw sienna. For the little flashes of boat colour, we're going to need some cadmium red, and I have some alizarin crimson here to dull things down and create some lovely darks and shadows later on. So to get started now, I'm going to start off by getting in the sort of proportions of where I want things to lie. I want to pick up lots of paint at one time, and I'm going to start off with my 3-inch brush. I'm just dabbing it into the water pot so that it's dampened. I'm not picking up a lot of water. It just saves the... Oh, by the way, if these wind chimes are annoying, I can take it down, but it's quite windy today, so I've just noticed it's making a lot of tinkling. So Iris, you let me know if it's getting too loud. Thanks. So here I go. I've got my large brush, and I want to go in with some greens to create this section through the middle, both above the land and the reflection in the water. So I'm going to dip into a bunch of these colours all at once. A bit of blue. This method I've learned from Hashim Akib. I don't know if you've had a demo from him. My style in the end doesn't look a lot like his, although the method starts out that way. I have some trusty bits of cardboard that I like to just turn the colours over so that I can tell what sort of a blend I'm getting without getting it all blended together smoothly. I don't want that look. So just judging the proportions and remembering I'm leaving off the bottom bit. I think that I'm working from about here. And so just going in with some very random marks, picking up plenty of paint. To get this surface does tend to suck the paint in quite a lot. We need to pick up more. Yes, that's a good mixture to know that it's blending quite nicely. And of course, I do want variety within this, so it's quite good that every time I do a blend, it'll be slightly different. We don't have to be precious about anything at this point because everything is up for change and modification. It's just to get some exciting brushwork and movement into the background area. Behind the tree, of course, is where we're getting that sort of horizon line where the water meets the shore. There's going to be a little bit more, if we can get as much accurately in at this point without it getting fussy, that would be good. So where the horizon line is, there's quite a lot of warm colours in the base of the reeds and the mangroves. So I'm just putting in that little bit of warmth into the mixture there without worrying about details or where it actually is. And then the whole of the water, the reflection of the trees in the water is slightly duller and darker. So I'm going to pick up the same colours, but making them a bit more bluish, a bit more blue in the mixture. And it's also sort of more streaky and dreamy, isn't it? So I'm hoping I can get that to look that way. Uneven sections on there. It's interesting. Sometimes I work on these wood panels because they're quite nice and robust if you're going to sell it to someone who wants it on a veranda or something like that. And sometimes I do it just because decent canvases are not available. So with a variety of motivations, sometimes you realize actually it's very interesting to get a different surface texture. And whilst I mean, obviously I love working on canvases, but this is not devoid of texture either. It has its own charm. And a little bit blue in that mixture, so I'll just put back in a little bit more of the greeny blend. Over this end, there is some water that we're seeing through where the river turns, and it's on its way out back to the sea in that direction. But I'm not worrying too much about exactly where everything is at the moment. I just want to get in some streaks and some lovely colours that are blending together and looking really interesting. Here is where the end of that section is. We'll be putting the sky reflections and the water and the sky on almost near the very end, so we won't have to worry about that for just now, getting the edge perfect or anything like that. And of course the boat is going to be right here as well. We might want to just bring these reflections down through the section that is in front of the tree, because it's going to be slightly more brownish. So I'm picking up a little bit of that alizarin crimson and some more raw sienna to put into the mixture there, along with our two greens. Let's see what that looks like as we're coming down through that section with the water lilies. I want it to just blend in like that. Once upon a time, I used to panic about things like that, but actually you find that in the end, that's really what makes a painting interesting. So actually something to be treasured rather than something to worry about. Rest of that mixture. There are some darker greens in the base of the tree there, so let's go back and pick up the green gold with a little bit more blue involved. Let's see if we can position those shadows in the water about here. Of course, there's a lot of detail to go on top of that eventually, but I'm not worrying about that just yet. More shadow work in this foreground part of the lagoon as well. So I was starting to tell you about the Black River trip. I've done it several times. It's quite an adventure. It's about a 2-hour drive for me to where you start and get on the boat. And so they'll drive you all the way up, slowly up the river, looking out for things like crocodiles and egrets, lots of egrets and lovely herons. All sorts of baby things hiding in the mangroves as well. We're going to go down here. We're going to change a bit more into a little bit more yellowish colour. So I'm picking up yellow ochre to go with that colour that we've just been using. It's solid actually. Let's have some more of those moody greens in there. And just bring it into the foreground there. There's a place called Sister Lou's, which I've also painted. And there you can stop and they'll make you fresh crab backs. It's like a little hors d'oeuvre type dish that you eat the crab meat right out of the, roasted from the back of the crabs. It's a specialty. You've seen this. I've got a notice on my phone, but it's not, I don't think it's troubling anything. Just stay there. Just wanted to make sure it wasn't in your view. Okay, so we've got a little bit of variety in here, and you can see already that we've got some sort of contouring going on where we not going to need too much more detail in some of these areas where it's not too important as to what the exact details are. We want the there are some lighter colours in the water that will bring the edge of the water down here, but as that's a lot of sky reflection, I think I'm just going to leave it in this background colour for now, and we'll touch in a little bit of lighter green in the foreground there, remembering that I'm not going to do as much of it as you see in the picture, because we're cutting off that portion. But we'll just hint at that coming through the bottom there. Okay. And while we're at it with the greens, there's a sort of a layer here of rushes that have, or pampas grasses or something, that have a light sort of layer of tops on them, and then you've got that solid layer of bush, the mangrove, taller mangrove trees behind. So let's put in that little light line. I'm going to pick up a little bit of cadmium yellow with some light green. You probably notice that I noticed in this photograph, and I do have other photographs of this area, sometimes you get a really bright blue sky. So on this particular day, it looks as if it was a little bit overcast, but that's not actually a bad thing. I think you can see more because you don't have quite so much glare. We can always invent a bit more blue in the sky if we want it to feel a bit more Caribbean when we get there. So from my biologist days, we were always very keen on telling people that they must be much more caring of the mangroves. My focus, of course, was on coral reefs, and I do still paint a lot of coral reef subject matter, but it's interesting that coral reefs and mangroves are all part of the same ecosystem that works together. I don't know if you know, but so a lot of properties will be very keen to cut all the mangroves out when they're trying to create a nice beach for their swimming people to swim in. But mangroves are really crucial because they not only do they buffer the waves that come in when storms hit, they stop soil erosion and shoreline erosion by just buffering that movement of the waves and stopping them from thudding against the shore. But also during the whole year round, they act as nurseries for all the little baby fish and stuff. It's amazing how many species from the coral reefs actually have some portion of their life cycle is spent in the mangroves. So it's a double whammy if the mangroves get cut out just for, people cut them for firewood, for making fish pots, making into charcoal, things like that, which can, it's such a waste. But without the education, what can we do? So I've just mixed up a bit more blue into that mixture, and I'm going to just pull that into here, and just as sort of a little bit of a test. I don't think it's actually going to be that useful. No, we'll need more lighter blues on it than that. So I'll just sort of remind myself that that's where the water is going to be. And so it'll be time now to let this dry off a little bit, and then we'll put in the actual features like the walkway and positioning of the boat and stuff. In the meantime, we can work up here. I wanted the mangroves up against the sky to look very sort of feathery and almost ethereal, because when you're looking at anything up against the bright sky, it tends to look a bit lost to view. So we can use the same colors, but I'm going to step it down into a smaller brush. Just safeguard this brush by putting it onto a palette. There's no usable palette to go on. let it rest there with some water on it so it doesn't dry up. Might want those colours again, so we'll just leave it handy. In the meantime, let's step it down to this 2-inch brush. Then I'm going to get some water into it just to help to protect so that the paint doesn't go all the way up into the ferrule. Nothing worse than trying to wash these brushes out for ages, trying to get the paint back out again. So we want some lighter colours that are very yellowish, and we'll just mix that on the side there. The yellow is very transparent, so quite often helps to have that light green that's much more opaque of a colour. So we'll put these in some kind of a scattered suggestion of movement here. Shouldn't be moving quite so much. We will, of course, be putting some sky in between as well, so that will be coming later. Getting some streaks into this, picked up a little of the green gold. We will be really creating the shape of the branches and everything with the sky. So it doesn't really matter what I put on there at this moment, as long as it has the right sort of colours and some movement in it, so it looks exciting. Go. A bit more green in there. So same light green, green gold, and let's put some blue into it. So cobalt blue. Just to mix that in and get a darker green. And these more solid greens are down here towards where we're meeting the rest of the background trees. When we were driving up this river, quite often you come across lone fishermen with their little canoe that sometimes they'll be walking through the river and they've got their canoe tied to their waist with a long line. And you know, sort of say to them, to the guide, well, how come they're doing that? I thought this is where the crocodiles go. So, yes, if the crocodile comes, he has to be quick. Seem to be all that bothered at all. There's at least 3 different types of mangroves that grow in this river, and they're defined loosely as the red ones, black ones, and white ones. And they're classic. I don't know if you know about the water in the mangrove swamps is usually blackish, and would be the black mangroves that are creating that, or the red ones, because the stain comes from all of these aerial roots that are reaching down into the water, and they produce these pigments that transfer into the water and make it look as if the water is dark. They provide amazing protection for all birds, as well as fishes, shellfish, crabs, all those kind of little bits of sea life. Darkish here. Sometimes it's quite hard to see actually what's going on. Just, you know, it's a bit darker there, so add a bit more blue into the green mixture. Gap in the trees, and you're seeing more shadows in there. So I'm just working into this strip of trees, looking for slightly more detail that I can pull together without it getting fussy, and respecting that line of light, which is yellower and slightly darker behind. I'm not worrying about where those branches are going to go. They're going to be on the top, on the stems and trunks. I should have left it lighter at the edge there. We can come back and fix that. And down to the water's edge there. It's kind of dark right now. It's good to stand back from your painting while you're doing it sometimes to make sure it's going in the right direction. I don't know that I have much of that luxury at the moment because it's too cluttered up here with camera equipment and stands and stuff, but you probably get a better perspective of what's going on in the okay. It's quite solid here. And it does come down to meet there. And here is a bit more solid. Let's put a bit more of the out of paint. It's a thing to watch for. Don't want to be scratching too much, but sometimes it's nice to get a sort of skating over effect, this kind of look. But for the most part, especially if you've got an area that's quite solid color, you want to be generous with the paint. Some people I know like to think of blending acrylics so that they look as if they've been painted by oils. But to my mind, it's important that you always play to the strengths of the medium that you are working with. And the thing about acrylics is that they dry fast, they are bright, they can have a lot of body. So that's the way I like to use them. I play to those strengths. I want to paint quickly. I want to cover the area and then get out, because you don't want to mess with it, just in the same way that when you make pastry, you don't want to play with it for too long or it just kills it to death and it's it becomes tough. In the same sort of way, acrylics can become very dull if you play with them for too long. So rather than blending and mixing and making a sort of thorough mixture so that you've got a clean uniform color, I much prefer to put them on like this, where you've got one color singing against the other, and it plays to the strength of the medium itself. Any questions yet?
None.
No?
No questions.
Okay. Sorry?
I keep looking at my little chat. Sorry, wait a minute. I keep
Oh.
looking at the chat button, but oh, hang on.
Oh, here's
Have you
one.
come? Hello, is there a reason for you? You don't
Yes.
put the sign before.
There absolutely, you could, if you wanted to, put some sky on and then paint these trees on the top. But I think I don't know what it is. It's some kind of perverse thing that maybe it's because I also like to finish with the highlights when I'm doing an acrylic painting, that I want those light areas to be the lightest lights that I put on at the end and make it sing. And there's a lot, I'm just in love with the way that it looks when you cut in around things like trees or the features in the front and put the sky on at the end. So I hope that answers the question. There's no have to, you absolutely could do it that way around. Okay, so at this point, I'm hoping, I love seeing, nice chunky bits of paint like that. But what we do have to be careful is that you don't go back in while they're still too sticky, otherwise it sort of messes it all up. So thinking this is almost dry down here. And so it's time to sort of position some things. Which brush I'm going to use.
Right. Susan, we have another one or another comment.
Yes.
I was disappointed that there was no gecko on the balcony.
Oh, we might be able to find you one before the end of the day. I'll keep a lookout. I've got a little brown one. I know what you're referring to. Death in Paradise.
Death in Paradise.
Right? And funnily enough, that is, it's a very sugar sweet for a murder show, but it is just exactly how the Caribbean is a lot of the time. So yeah. we were lucky enough to be able to build this house about 15 years ago. And I bought this plot of land from my friends and neighbours next door. We actually have a cave in the garden, a cave where bats live, and it's full of crystals. And I mean, things that it sounds too fantastic to be real. I can't quite believe that I have a cave in my garden, but I really do. There's quite a lot on this hillside. It's all riddled with limestone caves and evidence of where the Taino, who would have been the first people indigenously living here, not the Carib Indians, they're related to them, but not the same. They would have used it for a sort of ceremonial site. I mean, not anything too horrible, but there's evidence of faces being carved into the rock surface to ward off the evil spirits and things like that. So it's amazing the stuff that's in this place. I digress. Okay, so I'm thinking about how to plot in now the things that are important to us, like the boat and the walkway and the tree. So I'm going to go in, and this is not going to look like a finished thing just yet, but I want to have an idea with some dark paints to just plot the position of those things. So I'm just going to pick up a blue. I put my mixy thing. This cobalt blue, and turn it into the green that was already there. Now I'm not going very thick with this. I just want to use the side of this to mark where things are going. So I should really be looking at my thumbnail sketch, because that's where I have the proportions accurate. Let's see if I can hold that up then while I'm doing it. So I want the walkway to come further down towards the bottom than it does up there, and we'll make a bit more of the boat as well. So bearing in mind where the horizon line is, where the water is meeting the reeds, the boat is going to be, the engine is going to be back up there, and we've got back of the boat level, side of the boat's almost level, something like that angle. This side of the boat is going to be curved like that, come to point, and underneath the boat is all dark, so we want to plot in where that's going to go, and that's going to meet the walkway. And with just a bit more paint, right off the brush too much there. Yeah, a little bit of paint just so this moves a little bit more easily. Still done it rather small, actually. Make it a bit bigger. So obviously the time to change things is now before I get into any detail on there. We do want that part to still be rather, bring it round like that. Under the boat is dark. The walkway is going to be, it is an incline on that walkway, so if it looks kind of like, oh, it's not straight, you're right, it's not straight at all. And that's how it's been made. So I'm not doing this beautifully, it's just an indication of where things are. And so the other side of the walkway, bearing in mind perspective, it's going to come bigger as it gets closer to us. Then it's kind of to about here, I think. And we've got a big slab of rock and some shadow underneath it, and shadow all the way up the side of that walkway. There's the water, and there's some other sticks and stuff holding it up, but we won't go into that right now. And then there's the ladder and everything we'll put in lighter colours, just so that we know where this dark section is. Paint. Here. And of course this will cover up the beautiful colours that I created, but some of it has to be sacrificed if we're going to have a subject matter. So this will need to be a darker brownish colour, but just so that I know where that horizon is that joins the little island. It's like its own little mangrove island right there to the jetty. And hopefully we'll be able to see some of those nice colours poking through after we put on the boat the main tree trunk. All of these lovely aerial roots are what give the mangroves their quality of buffering the sea and also sheltering baby fish and stuff, lobsters and those things. So I've got an approximation of where things are going to be. And these I'm not going to worry about structure in there. We'll be putting the sky on, and very last of all those lily pads, water lilies there. So yes, this is good.
Susan, we have an environmental question come through.
Oh, sure.
Is the environment very much under the threat from development in Jamaica?
Yes, and a very good question. Since I came here in 1981, so the reefs look very different in those days, and it's unfortunately every time a hotel goes up, that is what causes some of the major problems. I mean, there is a problem with overfishing and stuff, but the amount of fishing that the detriment that the local people do eating is minimal compared to the silt that comes down. Oh, there's somebody coming in. That comes down the rivers or straight off the shore into the water when a hotel decides to build a golf course or put up another wing, or it's really, really terrible. At one stage they built the Ritz-Carlton next door to the hotel where we were running a dive operation, and within a few weeks of them starting, the entire reef was covered in 6 inches of silty mud. And of course, that just completely starves the reef of any sunlight and clean water. So we had a lot of die-off in that area because of it. And when you consider that that's happening all over the place, and particularly with mangroves, even like small residential areas that are on the waterfront, each of them wants to have their own little private access to the water. And oh, what are these nasty bushes doing here? So they sort of rather thoughtlessly cut them out, and in the process they are contributing to what will be rising sea levels and soil erosion that will damage their own property eventually. So it's very sad. Right, so what we need to do now is to get some really bright colors in for the boat, and the walkway, redeem that back to its sort of goldeny colors. So there's dappled shade going on as well. But I think I'm going to step down. I do quite often use palette knife as well, and I think I forgot to mention that. But one of the reasons I love to use palette knife with acrylics particularly is because you don't have to wash out all that paint and have it go into the water system. It's a bit alarming to me when I do a lot of brush work, just how much paint goes down the drain, or I'm trying various systems to coagulate the paint, and so you end up with the residue and filter that out, and then you've got clean water that you can put on the garden. But if you use something like a credit card or a palette knife, basically all of the paint goes on there, a little bit gets wiped on the towel, and the towel goes in the bin instead of any of it going down the drain. So I'm quite being drawn to using that instead. Let's see if we can put some of our more chunky features can go on with palette knife work. So I'm picking up more paint for this. That is some yellow ochre, and we'll use a bit of white. So I haven't used any white so far. I usually reserve the whites because it tends to make everything look a bit chalky. I reserve it for later on in the painting process to really where you want the highlights to be. So if we just streak it on in the same sort of direction that the boards are the way it's been built, and the streaks in there will actually help to give us some of its detail. Here we're in known territory. It's already got the right sort of colour underneath, but we'll still put the thicker paint on to give it that uniform kind of look. There are some shadows across the walkway up at its higher end. Stand it wider. You're right. Nice thing about that is you can get some nice straight lines very easily. And let's put in this rock that's nice and bright against the. I'm sure it's going to be entirely exactly the same shape rock, but doesn't really matter. And that will take us into this foreground. I like it when you've got a bit of an abstractness in the foreground because it stops the eye going there too much instead of elsewhere in the painting. The rock here, some more shadow over it, so we'll add the shadow when this is a little drier. Some features in there. Okay. Lines across it. We'll put that in later when it's a bit more dry. Some sensation of that going that way. So remembering, keep thinking that I must remember I'm only doing it so that here. A little bit more in the water there. Okay, so for the boat now, we'll change colours very easily with the palette knife. Quite often don't even bother to wipe it. But, picking up some red now, and we'll go back and put some more details in later. So red for the top of the boat here, so it's going to stand out nice. You may find that depending on the transparency of the colour you happen to be using, you might need to do a couple of layers before your red really sings out. It might be showing through the blue greens and stuff beneath. So just something to watch out for. It just depends on which paint you happen to be using. Might have been easy with a brush. Paint. We'll need some pinker bits where the sunlight has bleached out the red paint on the boat, but just so that we have a good basis for the red, and then we'll put the pink on top. So one of the things that I'm going to be doing later this year, I'm collaborating with another English artist called Alex McIntyre. She is an artist in her own right, and she also teaches the foundation year in at the university in Hertfordshire. And she's a trained coach too. So she and I are going to be collaborating on running a retreat in Jamaica in September. And so now is the time that we're sort of getting interest together for it. So if it's something that you think you might like to do, spend a week with us, just exploring and creating and using different techniques and connecting with the environment, going for a swim in the mornings and then playing with some different techniques and stuff. we're inviting people for little Zoom chats to ask any questions that they want. And our next one is on Friday. I can send a link for that if you want to share it with the group, if anyone's interested. Right, so I'm switching straight away to blue so that I can get some of this dark blue on the underneath edge of that boat. It was, you know, one of the things that I think people, if you've been a watercolor artist, that was my path. I always did watercolor for years and then sort of came to acrylics afterwards. But I always tend to forget how much darker acrylics dry because it's the other way around with watercolors. You tend to think that it's going to dry lighter than it does. So we'll see how dark that is. It does need to be very dark. It's just really a hint of blue in the shadowiness. And of course, I'm bringing the blue down where there's actually a deep dark shadow on the water as well. Not because it's the right color, but just because it's going to help us to know where the thing is. There's a little dark inside the boat there. It's really too wet to do that properly, but just to get the hint of it. And I'm going to use the same, I think I've lost the angle on this, to be honest. I think we'll maybe chop a bit of that out where I extended it. We'll put some of the shadow on, again with blue, but we can add to it to, maybe I'll make it blue-green. So it's more on this side and it's more. By the way, do you normally take a break in the middle?
Yes, I was going to say, did you want to break about, what time is it now? About past or now for 10 minutes? Does anybody want to break? Let me get a full screen on. Folks, do you want to break? Can you put your hands up if you do? Have a break. Oh, that's not good.
So we'll, yeah, I'll come to a point in a few minutes when we need to let it dry some more, and we can take it from there. It's a break.
Okay.
So this is lovely and creamy now with that amount of paint that's going on. Just get a nice straight edge across there. It becomes quite impressionistic as well. I think that's one of the things I like, is that if it were just me with a brush, I would make everything too literal. Whereas if you're working with a palette knife, it sort of stops you from being too finicky about getting it very accurate. And that to me is a good thing, because otherwise I tend to, you know, being a biologist, that tends to be my default, is to have every petal exact and so on. So quite a good thing. I have to let go of that. Let's pull some of this dark down here.
Oh, we've got another message here.
Yeah.
When you want a colour that's non-transparent paint, would you put white down first or just build up several layers of colour?
Personally, yes, you can do putting white down first so that it sings out more. I would always rather build it up with like a darker version of the colour and then a slightly more richer version of the colour, so maybe even 3 layers, so that you get it to sing with its own colour underneath rather than a chalkier white looking option. Now, can you see what I'm just skimming over the surface here, but it really gives the impression of those leaves in the water quite randomly. We also want to bring some upwards. Yeah, we'll work on some real darks after the break.
Okay.
Is that okay?
So if we have about a 10 minute break, folks, is that okay? Give you a chance to get a cup of tea or coffee or what you want.
Right, 10 minutes. So, and I'll leave, if you want to, you can just unmute everyone if they want to have a little chat while the break's on. That's fine with me too. I'll pause the recording.
Okay.
And
Okay.
So welcome back after the break. There was another good question from Gordon, I think. Do I ever dilute acrylic to make it transparent, and what's the best way to do that? Really good question, because I'm just going to take off that spotlight for a second. One of the things you should actually never do is to water down acrylic, because there comes a point at which it loses its consistency and breaks down so that it has no body to it, and it can flake off to, you know, if you apply it too much. It's okay on a watercolor situation if you've got a substrate that it can sink into, but if you water down, I think it's 40% is the borderline where you shouldn't go further than that, because it loses its integrity and it's no longer sticking to itself, if you see what I mean. So if you want to have that kind of a transparent look, the way to do it is to get a transparent acrylic medium and thin it down with the medium. So you're actually thinning clear acrylic with the color that you want. And that way you can create the most gorgeous transparent veils of color, but it's still 100% acrylic. So does that make sense? Hope it does. If you guys are seeing my face at the moment?
Yeah.
Yes. I thought I might, just before we get stuck in again, I'll just take you on a quick tour of my studio to show you a couple of things that have relevant bits of texture and stuff in. So this is one of my seascapes that I'm quite proud of. It's got a lot of found objects in it, in the surface. You can probably see this is burlap bags from the coffee bags. We've got mesh from when you get citrus fruits and stuff in bags, it's that kind of mesh. And there's even coffee grounds that look like sand in the surface here. So when I'm doing that, and this is of course the palette knife work that gives that lovely skimmy look. Important to seal all of those. If you add things into the surface, it's really important to seal them in. This is another one that's lighting's not good for that angle, but I use plant material sometimes to emulate the reefs, and that one is all about the reefs dying and stuff. So, and over here some other tropical looking views. This is actually a print on canvas, but it's just to show you that the quality of the prints on my website that they produce is quite good. You can see every brush stroke. This is an original that has found bits of string in it. And then there's some, these are other pieces that I've done for demos with flowers, which I think you've probably seen me do one of those before. And that one is poinsettias. And that's all I've got handy right now. So thought I'd give you a little quick whisk round. Oh, and if I don't know if you guys know that I did a children's book. Well, it's not really a children's book. It's a children from 5 to 93 or whatever they say it is. I got together with one of my friends from university, wrote the poem. And when I read it, I realized it's actually set in Jamaica. So he asked me if I wanted to do a couple of drawings for it.
Yes.
And ended up being a year-long project with a fully illustrated children's book with puzzles and all kinds of slightly environmental theme. It sort of gets kids to think about pet ownership, stuff like that. This is my cave in the garden with the bats. Anyway, so those are available in England. My daughter is sending them out if anybody orders them. So all of these things I've been mentioning are available on my website, which is easy to remember because it's susanclaire.art. That's my English website. I have another one that's based in the States, which does the prints and stuff, but you can get the links from one to the other. So the other one's susanclarefineart.com, but both pretty easy to remember. And you can find any of the information on, if you follow me on Instagram or Facebook, then you can find the links to the things I've been talking about. So let's get on with the painting.
Right. You've got from Gordon, you've got, yes, thank you. That makes sense. I think the water quality will also make a difference to watercolor media, e.g. due to the pH minerals, etc.
Yeah, yes. Yeah. When you use it, I don't think it would make much difference in if you mix it with acrylic, but it certainly would with watercolor. Yeah. True. Right, I'm going over to the spotlight again. And so what we've got to do now, we've got to create this little island. And I want to do that quickly and then put the details on top of it. So I'm going to go back to my 2-inch brush for a minute, dampening it. And let's dive into some, I want it quite dark, but it's sort of brown streaky rather than green streaky. So I'm just going to stick with brown and blue, turn those over together on my blue patch here. And if that looks about right, we'll just go on with that. So we're going from, I'm not trying to do the details of the ladder yet, we'll put that on afterwards, but let's just mark in where this big mound of mangrove roots is standing above the water. I like the streaks in that, it's good. It sort of comes up to the horizon line and a bit further up, and then we start to see the separate roots and trunks and things coming down together. So without trying to obscure some of this nice stuff, I want that to just sort of blend together. Unfortunately, I think we're going to lose that pretty bit of blue there. Diving into a bit more colour. So this is raw sienna and cobalt blue I'm using right now. It's giving us a greyish sort of brown. And we can go up. Because I've got 2 inches at a time, it's very easy to create these tree trunks. Just there's a whitish one going up right up there, and then a darker one in front of it. So we'll continue the lighter one with a different colour in a minute. This one we can actually see most of the progress of that trunk, or the branch rather, in front of the foliage. And there's bending it there, that's interesting. Thought I heard somebody ask something. You all right?
No, nothing yet.
Okay. I misheard. Yeah, so these are all kind of tangled together. If I happen to get it accurate, I'll be glad. And if it's not, then I'm not going to stress over it too much. One comes down behind this one in front, and then some darker colours too going on there. It's more to get the mass in, and then we'll put some highlights on top and maybe some extra darks in there. I think that's more important to get the bulk in there. And then we've got this interesting branch that's coming out this way. It looks like it's falling down from the tree next to it or something there, I'm not sure. Don't want these to all meet in one point really, it'll look too contrived. But let's see. Here we're going over. It's probably not enough distance between those two. Sorry about that. But as long as we get the gist of it right, will be anything. That is just. I think this is partly because they've made it into a treehouse platform for you to jump from. It doesn't quite make sense in terms of how the tree would normally grow. So it looks like some of these are broken off so that they can be nailed together, kind of thing. So let's see if we can, let's get that to look a bit more natural going up into there, and branching across from that one. And these are very obviously just brown tree trunks at the moment. They are fairly brown, whereas not many British trees are that brown, but because of the red nature of these, you know, the dye that they create, they do actually look quite brown like that. And just put in a few extra bits here and there, which we can dodge around when we're putting in the sky. And that will be fun. Picking up now, I want to make it all a little lighter, so we can do that greyish one on the side there. So the same colours, the blue and the yellow ochre or raw sienna, and I'm picking up a little white to go with that so that we can get a greyish version of it. And that will just give us enough variety, I think, to read as something catching the light through there. He's coming forward here and then splintering into different ribs. I think kind of want it to be a bit more creamy than that in most places, but we'll put a greyish side to some of these trunks to make them look a bit more three-dimensional. This one's very light. So, okay, some random bits in there. I love how they're all matted together and kind of overlapping. Crazy. Okay, while I've got this colour, I'm just going to streak some in across that walkway to take care of the shadows that are falling on it, and maybe hint at some of the texture and the planking. Top there. Now that this is much drier, I couldn't have done that before the break. And sure about the structure of that one, I'll just hint at it like that, with a bit more grey in the shadowed areas on the shoreline here. And let's put a couple of hints. I'm aware that since I've cut off some of that side, I shouldn't really be seeing as much of these trees, but since we've got some hints of tree, we'll have some hints of branches to go with them, eh? And might be enough. There's some interesting little branch going up there, branching out. Bits here. Some dark bit going that way. Of course, I could spend 3 hours on these branches, but that would mean I wouldn't finish your painting today. So I'm going to cut myself short on that score and not fiddle with it for ages. To just fix up this bit of shadow here. I should really put this on with the palette knife, but I'm just mixing it up a little better with the, use the green and that too on the other side. So picking up that paint with the palette knife so that I can get a change from there. I think that's not quite the right colour. I'll have to put some more blue in it. And of course it won't matter if it's kind of streaky because there'll be weeds and all sorts in that. Whoops. In that water. Actually, that looks about, kinks in about the right place where the change of angle takes place. We can probably leave that. A bit of dark across the top there. And we've got some uprights that are people to hang on to when they're walking there. So You can just hint at those. That's in the middle. If these look a bit random, it's probably because they are. Oh, I'll put that on the rock instead of in the reflection. Never mind. Works out. So some of this dark green I can now add into here as well with a bit more texture to it, so that we can get the feeling of those. Some of them. And breaking the paint out of the brush, so I'm not going to waste it. The back there is grey. Let's put some creamier colour. So I'm picking up some more white to mix into that. And some more raw sienna, just so that it's a creamier version of the brownie sort of colour that we had. And we need to have some of that in here too. It's overlapping and twisting root patterns and so together on that. Very much there. Keep it in the centre where it's light. Coming down in front, I can't quite see it close enough. Right here. Water there. So it's time ready to put in this ladder. I've been putting it off long enough. So there's a sort of structure going up onto the edge of where it's really dark in the water. And then there's some lighter crossbars. So I think we'll put that as it is. And then add a little bit of yellow with this colour we've been playing with. A little more white and a little more yellow ochre. And that should do the job. Give us a nice creamy lighter colour that will attract the attention of lucky they're higgledy-piggledy, because so is my rendition of it. Just for continuity's sake, we'll put a little bit of that colour into the walkway as well. Shadow maybe. And some of the goings on beneath the edge there. Should be a bit more even. Really. They don't all match. I'm not worried about that, but I just want them to be a little bit more better. And while I'm now moving, I like to move from one colour into the next, so build it from the remains of what was there. So I'm just adding a bit more white into that same colour, and we'll use that for the side of the boat. For that, I know in my head, I know that that's a white piece of siding on the boat, but it's not actually going to be bright white, and neither is that engine on the back. So this colour will probably blend nicely without standing out too garishly as a completely foreign object. There's something, piece of rope or something carrying across the valve. Oh, it's the edge of the top part of the boat compared to the inside. And somebody's hat is on there, but we won't necessarily put the details of the hat. Step back from it a little and see where I've got to. Okay, while we've got that sort of colour going, I'm going to pick up a bit of the red, but it's slightly separate, and pick up some more white to go with that red, so we can get in some of those faded paint bits on the top of the boat, just to make it look a bit more realistic. It's much too idealistically red at the moment. A bit more like faded paint. And the inside is slightly more yellowy than the top. So let's add a little bit of yellow into that. Let's turn it orange, but a bit more white, I think. Okay. Really, this palette knife technique gives the look of peeling paint quite well. Something in, oh, it's the back seat there. Let's see, it's catching the light. The side there actually is catching the light. A bit more around here. It's like the dent beneath the edge of the red part there. How's that looking? It's really bluish, I think. It's probably time to move on. How are we doing for time? I should probably start bringing some sky and some blues, I think, some light blues. Just for the continuity, I want to put this into some of the foreground area here to with the oops, that's not very good. Luckily, it's quite easy to remove. I've got a streak of pink I didn't want. I've rid up with something else. A bit more variety within these colours would be nice. So I'm noticing that down the side of that there's sort of a change of colour. At least we can see it in the foreground. It's not so visible as it goes away from us. And we can some markings horizontally just to get the hints of those boards going across. A little bit in the lower portion of this rock will help to make it look like it's turning away from the sun and catching the, it's a bit more grey into it. So I've picked up a teeny bit of blue just to add, tone down that beige. And, yeah, I'm going to move on to, I'm just putting my brush and my palette knife into the water to keep them from drying up. So in order to do the sky, I'm going to step down to a smaller brush, which means moving quite quickly because we've got ground to cover. But I'm going to mix up the blue whites in the center palette here and start cutting in and working my way through here. I'm just wondering if I should start down here since this is a more important section, and then that will dry so I can put the lilies on. Yes, we'll do that first. So this is not very, very blue, but it is reflecting the whitish sky down there. So let's try now with this light blue by Liquitex and see what we can create. Maybe a touch of ultramarine. It needs to be slightly purplier, I think, for here. And again, I'm mixing the look of the palette knife work with this work with the brush, so I have to be careful so that it does actually work together. If I just cover up that for a bit. So just working my way into get the feel of those bits of trees there, breaking it up so it's not a solid line. And of course, as we come down here, you lose the blue and you start seeing through to the goldeny colours in the sand. So I'm not going to use a lot of blue in this area. In between some of those bits there, there's going to be a lot of lilies here as well, so it's not entirely going to be all. Bring in some of these blues over here, reflecting the sky further back. A little bit sticky. I don't want your paint to get sticky. So I've just picked up enough water to get it moving, and I'll pick up more paint as well because I don't want it to be too thin. Okay, so there's a section of white in the white in this actually that will
Dreadful
colour for right now. Any more questions? And above the horizon line where there's a little bit of light sky there, so that's reflecting here. Now I don't want to bring it up to the edge of that branch and then stop, so it'd have to go a bit more further on the other side. Otherwise it will look too convenient. And let's start. I really should be working from this side to this if I don't want to lean on my work, right? But so I'm over here already and I'm moving fast because we need to get it all done. So I'm just working my way into this for now as it comes, kind of thing. And I'm trying to keep my brushwork blocky so I don't like too many rounded corners and stuff. Just looks a bit contrived. I'm looking at the overall, where's the overarching shape of that contour where it comes down here, so we can outline that and keep that patch of sky there. And that connects with this nicely, yes. It's sort of a bit like a jigsaw at this point because you want it to make sense, but you don't want it to be too literal. So one of the things to remember when we're doing skies is that it's always a little light whiter, usually towards the horizon, like here, whiter or yellower, unless there's clouds in the sky. I think there are some clouds which are making this look quite white up here. The one thing I also don't want to do is to create too much attention with brights and lights to take the attention away and out of the page. So I need to make sure I'm not doing that at the same time as being true to the photo. One of the things that's good about this composition, if you hadn't noticed already, is that we've got some primary colours working together near the focal point, which tends to draw the eye into that point, as well as the lines leading into the interesting area, and then some way for it to circle back again, back down to where we want the eye to be interested. My neighbours have some fabulous koi in their pond, and they were very alarmed the other day because we had a heron that looked very interested in hanging around. But so far I don't think they've lost any. And I was thinking that I saw a white egret sitting on a branch in one of my trees, and I thought, yes, I'm sure when he looked in my pond compared to next door, he was probably thinking, this isn't up to scratch over here. I have a makeshift pond with lots of little guppy type things in them to stop the mosquitoes, but they're not particularly ornamental. So I'm going to be back in England sometime this summer, actually running some workshops. We've got a slightly alarming situation with where my studio is. The building has been given notice. So there is if you're feeling generous and you want to support HOFS, HOFS, Hadley, there's a petition up to try to get the Essex County Council to give us an extension so there's time for community people to come together to form the entity that's needed to take over the running of the building from the arts organisation Aquaba that used to run it have just decided to pull out, really because of a problem with the heating system. But any signatures are welcome. That's another one. You can find all the links on my social media. Again, trying to wet my brush just slightly to get the paint moving more, and adding a bit more of the light blue into the mixture. We do need white with it though, it's too rich. And I'm going back into the water for a minute, so I'm adding a bit more of that ultramarine to give it that slightly more purpley look. And over here now, I want it to sure we've got some continuity going under that little bridge. Should have done that at the same time so it's the same colour. In honesty, there we go. Get some puddles here, catching the light. It's not really taking in those big leaves there. Some of that vertical look that you get with reflections could work here, I think. Probably brought that up a little high, but we can always put back in some branches and some leaves later. Bit wet there. And on the inside edge of this is probably dry enough to skim that over, yes. And here we need it to be changed into a more yellowy version. So just looking at what's going on here. There's a few bits. This is going to be tricky to try and negatively paint these tree trunks that are reflecting from here. We've got this kind of angle, and then up to here. At the same time, I did want to change the colour, so it's all quite inconveniently in the same place. But if we can just hint at some of that, I think that will tell the story when I put on the lily pads as well. It will all just work its way together. Definitely more, needs to be more yellowy down there. So let's pick up a little bit of work on the side of this patch of colour and creates a more sandy version of it, which can just go over some of those with it. Hopefully do the job. Quite right. Yeah. Cover that over. Sandy. Okay. Bits in there where you're looking through to the rocks. Here and there, so. Let's go back up here. That doesn't look finished. And I just want to wash out my brush a bit. I don't have the sandy colour up there. More white into my blue colour there. And we'll just add a little bit more white into here. It looks like it's wanted through here. So again, we're looking for the it's not a horizon line, it's the top of the tree line, which of course is interrupted with bits of branches and stuff, but we can sort of approximate to that, working our way through to give us a sense of that edge of the trees. And breaking up the solid mass of green with some lights. Up there a bit. Very much a negative painting thing here. I mean, it'd be nice if we could put in the tracery of all of the little lines to make it easy, but you really have to sort of invent some as you go along. And it's important to keep the paint juicy because I don't really want it to look threadbare like that. And of course, with the surface, the painting surface is still quite thirsty. It's amazing how much it wants to absorb. More blue, I think. Quite often observe that when you're looking through the trees, you get a bluer, it's not showing in this photo, but you get a bluer effect when you're looking through between the leaves, and I suppose that's because there's bluish pigment in there. Mentally, I think this is probably the hardest part because you have to invent things. And it's easy to overdo it. So Right, are you seeing what I'm doing at the top there?
Yes. Well,
Like it wasn't quite in the picture. There we go. Any more questions or a chance?
no questions at the moment.
Oh, I know what.
Hang on a minute, I've got one here.
Oh yeah.
I meant to. Do you? Oh, sorry, I've lost it again. Wait, let me just pull him up. Do you get to the point where you hold mental image of the scene and just keep going with that rather than keeping the picture referring back to the image?
You can. It's good to get to that point where you just look at the painting as a whole and see what it needs to balance it up, rather than keep going back to the reference picture. But I must admit, for these kind of skies, I'm not doing everything brushstroke for brushstroke, but I do have to keep looking back to see if I've got the general kind of feel for it, because it's very easy to go off track. One of the things I thought your members might like to know about is that I run an online painting club, which is, we don't paint online, but we come together. I pre-record classes, so you can access them from any country. I've got people from Jamaica, from England, and from the US that join. It's a very small group, so it's friendly and kind. And so we come together every Tuesday and do a live seminar where you can ask me any questions or share your work and get lovely feedback from everyone. And it's run on a monthly basis subscription, so you only have to commit to 1 month if you want to try it. And it's about £36 for a month, and you get 2 full-scale paintings to do. So the videos for those are about an hour long. You can paint along as I'm doing it, or you can watch it through and then do it afterwards. You get access to, I also do 2 new 10-minute tips every month to give you technique tips that help with the projects we're actually working on. And in addition to that, you get the 4 live sessions, and you get access to all the archives, which we've now got about 70 painting projects, about the same number of 10-minute tips, and all the replays of the previous seminar sessions. So if anyone's interested in that, you can look it up at, well, there's a link on my website, but you can also look up Patreon. It's hosted on Patreon, which is patreon.com, Susan Clare, /Susan Clare. I don't want it to become very big, but we have got room for like 5 or 6 more people. We do a rotation of media. So one week it will be watercolor, the next week it will be acrylic, and then another week it will be mixed media with a combination of the two, or sometimes I'll do things like wax crayon or acrylic inks thrown into watercolor, those kind of combinations. It's a little white here. And lily pads. What are we doing for time? Ooh. Have you got time for me to put some lily pads on?
It's 9:26. So
I'm okay for time, but it, it
okay,
depends on.
yes, you can do a couple of, get some lily.
So going back into my light green. I know it's a good thing about people being in their homes instead of in a hall. You have to be quite so strict about the cut off. That's too bright green, so I'm going to put some yellow ochre with it. Maybe a touch of that, maybe too much of a touch. Just put some more green with it. That was raw sienna there. We've definitely got some lily pads of this colour, so let's just dot them in. And I want to be very random with these and just pull them in between the other things. Some of them are running together, some of them are overlapping, some of them are in the sunshine, and some are in the shadow part. So there's a whole variety of them going on. We want them to sort of crawl forward from back there in between the shadow parts. We'll have some here that are interacting with this part where we've got the reflection of the tree trunks. I'm going to make them a bit more green again. There definitely are some that are very light green. Nice and juicy paint. That's the main thing with these, I think. They're probably coming out a bit too tall, but you know, if we had 2 or 3 strung together, then they wouldn't look like that. So we'll be able to get away with it. If I had more time, I would be more precious about this and clean up the mess on the end of my brush a bit better. There we go, so that it's more neat and get the right shape in the lily pads. Trying to do this very quickly for you, so it's a little bit haphazard. They tend to grow in clumps. So more lime green in that part. Don't want to overdo them, but a couple more up there. Green over here. Just to sort of finish that off in that corner, just a bit more foliage looking streaks. We've got this. I think I'm going to leave it there.
Okay.
Can I see it all?
Right, let's pull everybody back in. Did you want to unmute people?
Sure, yes.
Yeah.
How do I do that again? Mute all and mute all and then unmute all or something. Ask all to unmute. There you go. And Iris, I've lost you. Where are you?
Unmute. You can unmute.
Are we not
Right.
connected now anymore?
Yes.
No, we are connected.
Oh, we are.
You can put on a chat thing if you want.
Right.
Do you want to see everybody? Was that the idea to? Do you want to see everybody's faces?
Shouldn't
Yes,
think so.
Andrew says.
There you
Andrew
go.
says
No, you can avoid
Susan.
it.
Oh, thank you so much for listening and
Thank you.
being a part of today's session. And I hope you like my Lagoon at Rudy's.
Andrew
you,
sent a
Susan.
message. Wonderful
Oh.
demo, Susan. Thank you. Oh, and thank you.
Thank
to me.
you.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye,
Okay.
everybody. I hope you enjoyed that.
Thanks, Susan.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Bye.
All in the summer.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.
You just push your link.
Thank you.